The city was alive with lights, cars, and the constant hum of business, but inside one mansion at the top of the hill, silence ruled. That silence belonged to a man named Armin, a millionaire whose name was printed in newspapers, whose face appeared in magazines, and whose wealth was spoken of like a legend. To outsiders, he had everything a man could ever want. Expensive suits lined his wardrobe. Priceless paintings decorated his walls. His garages were filled with the latest cars, and his bank accounts never ran dry. Yet, all the gold and marble in his house could not cover the emptiness that grew inside him. That emptiness had a name: Aisha, his daughter. Aisha was 12, gentle and sweet, with eyes that once sparkled brighter than the chandeliers in their mansion. But now, her laughter was rare, her smile faint, and her legs, lifeless. 2 years ago, a terrible car accident had taken her ability to walk. Doctors had tried surgeries, therapies, endless medicines. Nothing had worked. The girl who once danced around the garden now sat in a wheelchair, her tiny hands gripping the sides like they were the only thing keeping her upright. Armin watched her every day. He would come home after meetings, loosen his tie, and walk through the quiet halls until he reached her room. She always greeted him with love, but it broke him to see her pretending to be strong. At night, when she thought he was asleep, he sometimes heard her crying softly, wishing she could run in the fields again or simply stand beside him. What is the use of money, he often thought, when the one person I love most cannot be healed by it? For a man who built empires, he suddenly felt powerless. He had spent fortunes to bring in the best doctors from around the world. Some spoke in medical terms he could not even pronounce, promising hope but delivering only disappointment. Some avoided his eyes when they admitted that science could do no more. Each failed attempt left Armin more broken, more bitter, and more aware that his power ended at the wheelchair his daughter sat in. Still, he tried to hide his despair. Every morning at breakfast, he forced a smile as he poured her juice. Every evening, he brought her small gifts, dolls, or storybooks, pretending they would bring joy. But Aisha was smart. She saw through his mask. "Baba," she whispered one night as he tucked her into bed, "don't be sad. Maybe this is how God wants me to be." Her words stabbed him deeper than any insult or loss in business ever could. She was comforting him, when it should have been the other way around. He turned away quickly so she would not see the tears in his eyes. The world outside continued to praise Armin. They called him the Golden Man, the tycoon of the decade, a symbol of success. But inside his heart, he was just a father who would give away every penny if it meant his daughter could take one step again. Sometimes he sat alone in his study, staring at old family photographs. He remembered the days when Aisha would run into his office, giggling, asking him to leave work and play. She loved to dance on his feet while he held her hands, spinning her around like music filled the world. Now, those memories hurt more than they comforted. They were reminders of what had been stolen. And the mansion itself, once full of laughter and gatherings, had grown cold. Servants walked quietly, conversations were short, and joy seemed like a stranger who no longer visited. Even celebrations felt empty. On her last birthday, Aisha sat in her wheelchair as balloons floated around her. She smiled politely, but when it was time to blow the candles, she closed her eyes for a long moment. Armin knew what she wished for. It was the same wish he carried every second of his life. Still, no amount of cake or singing could hide the fact that the biggest gift she wanted could not be wrapped or bought. Late at night, Armin often stood by the window, looking at the city lights below. Each light represented someone living their life, running freely, walking with ease. His chest tightened as he wondered why fate had chosen his child to suffer. He would have taken her place 1,000 times over if he could. But fate is cruel in ways even the rich cannot bribe. The pain of helplessness ate him alive. And with each passing day, he became quieter, colder to the outside world. Business partners noticed he was distracted. Friends stopped inviting him to parties. He didn't care. Nothing mattered anymore. His world was reduced to two people, himself and his daughter. And between them stood a wheelchair that chained her and crushed him. This was the broken world Armin lived in. A world where success meant nothing, where gold was dust, and where every sunrise was a reminder that the one miracle he prayed for had still not come. And yet, destiny has its own timing. While he believed no change was possible, life was secretly preparing an encounter that would shatter his despair. He did not know it yet, but very soon, a voice would rise from the streets, a beggar boy, dirty and barefoot, yet carrying something more powerful than wealth. A voice that would stop him in his tracks with words he never imagined hearing: "Sir, I can make your daughter walk again." The evening was cool, and the streets of the city glowed under the soft light of street lamps. Armin sat in the back seat of his black car, silent as usual, staring out the window at the crowds rushing home. His driver knew better than to disturb him. These rides were often filled with heavy silence, a silence that came from a heart carrying too much pain. On this particular evening, Armin told the driver to stop near the old marketplace. It wasn't part of his usual route. He rarely stepped into such places anymore, but something inside him told him to get out. Maybe it was the sight of families walking together, children laughing with their parents, or maybe it was just the weight of his own loneliness pushing him out of his bubble. The marketplace was alive with noise and colors, vendors shouting prices, children tugging on their mothers' hands, the smell of roasted corn mixing with the scent of spices. For everyone else, it was ordinary. For Armin, it was a world far away from his own, a world untouched by the silence of his mansion. He walked slowly, hands in his pockets, lost in thought. People glanced at him, some recognizing the famous businessman, but no one dared approach. He was known for his stern face, the man who had everything but carried himself like he had nothing. Then it happened. A small voice broke through the chaos of the market. "Sir," it said softly. Armin turned, expecting a beggar asking for money. He had seen many before: children with empty bowls, women with tired faces. But what he saw made him pause. It was a boy, no older than 14, barefoot, wearing clothes torn and patched in too many places to count. His hair was messy, his hands dirty, but his eyes were clear, shining with a strange confidence. He wasn't holding out his hand to beg. He wasn't asking for coins. He was simply standing there, staring straight at Armin, as if he knew him. "Sir," the boy repeated, his voice firmer now, "I can make your daughter walk again." Armin froze. For a moment, the sounds of the market faded: the vendors' calls, the laughter, the footsteps. All he heard were those words echoing in his ears. His chest tightened, his mind racing. His daughter? How could this boy know? And why would he say such a thing? Shock quickly turned to anger. He stepped closer, towering over the boy. "What did you just say?" His voice was low, sharp. The boy didn't flinch. He looked straight into Armin's eyes and repeated slowly, "Your daughter. I can make her walk again." Armin's fists clenched. He thought it must be some cruel trick. For years, strangers had come to him with false promises, claiming they had miracle cures, only to leave him disappointed and cheated. But this was different. This was a child, a beggar with no reason, no power, no gain. Why would he dare say such a thing? "Who told you about my daughter?" Armin demanded. "No one," the boy replied calmly. "I just know. And I can help her." Armin's driver stepped forward, ready to push the boy away, but Armin raised a hand, stopping him. Something inside him, against all logic, told him not to dismiss this so quickly. The millionaire studied the boy, searching for a lie in his eyes, but all he found was strange determination. There was no fear, no hesitation, no greed. "You're just a beggar," Armin said bitterly. "What can you possibly do that doctors, specialists, and hospitals could not?" The boy smiled faintly. "Because I don't heal with money. I heal with what I was taught." His words were strange, almost mysterious, and yet they lingered in Armin's mind. For the first time in years, something stirred in his heart, something he thought was long dead. Hope. Fragile, dangerous hope. He hated it, and yet he needed it. Armin turned away, shaking his head. "Enough. I don't have time for nonsense." He began to walk back to his car, but then he heard the boy again, his voice calm, unshaken. "If you don't listen, your daughter will never walk again. But if you give me one chance, just one, you will see a miracle." The words hit him like a storm. His footsteps slowed. He stopped in the middle of the street, breathing heavily. He told himself it was foolishness. He told himself it was madness to trust a stranger, especially a beggar boy with no proof. But deep inside, the desperate father in him whispered, "What if it's true?" He turned back slowly. The boy was still standing there, waiting patiently, as though he knew Armin would return. "What do you want?" Armin asked, his voice quieter this time. "Money? Food? A home?" The boy shook his head. "I want nothing. Only to help her." Silence stretched between them, heavy and tense. Armin's heart pounded. He was a man used to control, used to facts and figures, deals and contracts. But this was none of that. This was something his wealth couldn't measure, something his logic couldn't explain. Finally, he nodded. "Come with me." The driver looked alarmed. "Sir, you can't," I said. Armin repeated firmly, "He's coming with us." The boy's eyes lit up, not with greed, but with purpose. He followed Armin to the car, barefoot on the cold pavement, carrying nothing but himself. As the car drove away, Armin sat in silence, staring at the boy from the corner of his eye. Who was he? Where did he come from? And most importantly, was there even the smallest chance that he could truly do what he claimed? The boy, sitting calmly despite the luxury around him, turned to Armin and said softly, "Your daughter will walk. You'll see." For the first time in a long time, Armin didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or believe. The car rolled quietly through the city streets, the glow of passing lights painting faint reflections on the windows. Inside, the air felt thick with unspoken thoughts. Armin sat with his arms crossed, his sharp eyes fixed on the boy who sat across from him. The boy's clothes were ragged, his bare feet dangling just above the carpeted floor of the luxury car. Yet he looked strangely calm, as if he belonged there, as if none of this was unusual to him. Armin's driver glanced at the rearview mirror several times, confused and worried, but he said nothing. It wasn't his place to question his master's decisions. Still, he couldn't understand why a millionaire would bring a beggar boy into his world, let alone into his car. Armin himself wasn't sure. Logic screamed at him to throw the boy out, to call the whole thing nonsense. And yet, there was something in those words the boy had spoken in the marketplace, something that pierced through the layers of his doubt. "I can make your daughter walk again." That sentence was like a seed planted in his heart, and no matter how much he tried to push it away, it had already begun to grow. The car finally turned through the gates of the mansion, its headlights sweeping across tall hedges and marble fountains before coming to a stop at the grand entrance. Servants rushed forward, confused to see their master stepping out with a poor, barefoot stranger. None dared speak, but their eyes carried questions. "Bring him inside," Armin said firmly, and that was the end of it. The boy followed without hesitation. He did not look at the golden chandeliers above or the polished marble beneath his feet. While others who entered the mansion often gasped at its beauty, the boy's eyes stayed calm, focused, as if none of the wealth mattered. Inside, Armin led him through the long halls toward a room where soft music played. The boy slowed slightly when he heard laughter, a light, gentle sound. It was Aisha. She sat in her wheelchair near the window, a book open on her lap. The moment she saw her father, her face lit up. "Baba, you're home early," she said. Armin's heart softened. He forced a smile and nodded. "Yes, my love. And I brought someone with me." The girl turned her head, curious. Her eyes landed on the boy, who stood quietly behind her father. Her lips curved into a small smile. "Who is he?" Before Armin could answer, the boy stepped forward. "Hello," he said gently. "My name doesn't matter. I've come to help you." Aisha tilted her head. She was used to meeting doctors and therapists, strangers who came with promises and left with excuses. But this boy was different. He was no doctor, no man in a white coat carrying charts and tools. He looked poor, tired, even hungry, yet his voice carried something the others never had: warmth. Armin cleared his throat, uneasy. He didn't want to frighten his daughter with false hope, not again. But before he could explain, Aisha's soft voice cut through the room. "You came to help me?" she asked. "Yes," the boy replied simply. "I can make you walk again." The words hung in the air like a spark. Armin's heart raced. He had heard it already in the marketplace, but hearing it again in his daughter's room, in front of her, made his chest tighten with both fear and hope. Aisha stared at the boy, then at her father. "Is it true, Baba?" she whispered. Armin opened his mouth, but no words came. For once, he did not know what to say. He could not promise her miracles, and yet he could not crush the light that had suddenly appeared in her eyes. The boy knelt down beside her wheelchair, his gaze gentle. "Do you believe me?" he asked softly. For a moment, the room was silent. Then Aisha gave the smallest nod, her lips trembling. "I want to," she said. That single sentence was enough. Armin felt something shift inside him. He had spent years chasing cures through science, through wealth, through men who spoke big words. But here was a barefoot boy, offering nothing but belief, and somehow, that belief was already healing something inside his daughter's heart. Armin looked away, swallowing the lump in his throat. He didn't want to admit it, but deep inside, he felt it too. A spark of hope. The boy reached into a small cloth pouch tied around his waist. He pulled out a handful of dried herbs, their scent filling the air with an earthy sharpness. Setting them on the table, he spoke quietly. "These are not medicines from hospitals. They are gifts from the earth, passed down to me. They do not cost money. They only need faith." Armin frowned. He wanted to demand proof, to question, to control, but his daughter's eyes stopped him. They were glowing, alive in a way he hadn't seen in years. "Show me," she said eagerly. The boy smiled, a soft, knowing smile. He placed the herbs aside and pulled out something else from his pouch, a wooden flute, old and worn, its surface scratched from years of use. "This," he explained, "is not just music. It carries a power you cannot see, but you can feel. Tonight, I will play for you." Armin's heart pounded. His logical mind screamed that it was absurd. Herbs and flutes? This was not medicine. This was not science. And yet, for the first time in so long, his daughter's face was glowing with joy instead of sadness. He couldn't bring himself to take that away from her. As the evening darkened outside, the boy lifted the flute to his lips. A soft, haunting melody filled the room, wrapping around the walls like a gentle embrace. Aisha closed her eyes, her fingers gripping the arms of her chair as if she could feel the music flowing into her. And Armin stood silently in the corner, torn between doubt and belief, but holding on to the smallest, most fragile thing of all, hope. The soft sound of the wooden flute drifted through the mansion, carrying a tune that seemed older than time. It was not the polished music of professionals, nor the kind played at concerts. It was simple, raw, and hauntingly beautiful. Every note felt alive, like it carried a hidden message only the heart could understand. Armin stood near the wall, his arms crossed tightly over his chest, watching in silence. He wanted to scoff, to call it foolishness, but something in the air kept him still. It wasn't just music. It was something deeper, something that wrapped around the room and touched places inside him he had long shut away. Aisha sat in her wheelchair, her eyes closed, her breathing calm. She was listening as though the music was a language she knew by heart. Her small fingers tapped faintly on the chair's handles, following the rhythm. A warmth spread across her face, and for the first time in years, her lips curved into a genuine smile. The boy's eyes were closed as he played, his hands moving gracefully over the flute. He looked nothing like the beggar Armin had seen in the marketplace. In that moment, he seemed like a messenger, carrying something beyond understanding. When the last note faded into silence, the room felt different, lighter, softer, filled with a strange peace. Aisha opened her eyes slowly. She blinked, then whispered, "It feels warm inside me, Baba. Like something is waking up." Armin's heart thudded. His mind rushed to explain it. Maybe it was imagination, maybe it was just the emotion of the moment. And yet, deep inside, he felt the same warmth. The boy lowered the flute, placed it gently on his lap, and reached for the herbs he had set on the table. He crushed a few leaves with his fingers, releasing a sharp, earthy scent that filled the room. Mixing them with water from a small clay bottle he carried, he made a paste and handed it carefully to Aisha. "Rub this on your legs," he instructed softly. Armin immediately stepped forward. "Wait, what is this? You can't just give her something without knowing what it is." "I need to know." The boy looked up calmly, his eyes steady. "Trust me. These are not poisons. They are herbs from the earth, the same earth that gives us food to live. They are not meant to harm her, only to awaken what sleeps inside her." Armin clenched his jaw, torn between his protective fear and the strange trust building within him. He looked at his daughter. Aisha's face was glowing with a hope he had not seen in years. "Please, Baba," she whispered. "Let me try." Her voice broke him. With a heavy breath, he nodded. "All right." The boy dipped his hands into the paste and gently rubbed it onto Aisha's thin legs. His touch was soft, respectful, almost reverent, as though he knew her pain personally. The scent of the herbs filled the air, sharp but strangely comforting. At first, nothing happened. Silence wrapped the room, broken only by the faint crackle of the fireplace. Armin's chest tightened with doubt. He opened his mouth to speak when suddenly Aisha gasped. Her toes twitched. It was small, almost invisible, but it was there. Armin froze, his eyes widening. His heart raced as he knelt beside her chair, staring at her feet. "Aisha, did you feel that?" "Yes," she cried softly, her eyes wide with wonder. "Baba, I felt it. I felt something." Her toes moved again, this time stronger, as though waking from a deep, endless sleep. Tears filled her eyes, rolling down her cheeks, but they were not tears of sadness, they were tears of hope. Armin covered his mouth with his hand, his body trembling. He had spent millions on treatments, endless nights in hospitals, and not once had he seen even the smallest sign of movement. And now, in his own home, a beggar boy with nothing but herbs and a flute had done what the world's best doctors could not. The boy did not celebrate. He only smiled gently, as though he had expected it. "It has begun," he said quietly. "But this is only the first step. Healing takes time. She must listen to the flute every night, and the herbs must be used for many days. Slowly, her strength will return." Armin could barely speak. His throat tightened with emotions he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. He wanted to shout, to laugh, to cry, but all that came out was a whisper, how is this possible? The boy looked at him calmly. Not everything can be explained with money or science. Some things come from faith, from love, from kindness that is never forgotten. Armin's mind was filled with questions, but his heart was filled with something stronger, faith. For the first time, he let himself believe. Aisha's smile that night was brighter than the stars outside. She leaned back in her chair, her eyes heavy with sleep, still whispering, "Baba, I felt it. I really felt it." Armin tucked her in gently, his hand shaking as he stroked her hair. He kissed her forehead, something he hadn't done in years out of fear of showing weakness. Tonight, he didn't care. Tonight, he felt alive again. When she finally drifted into sleep, Armin turned to the boy. "Tell me," he said in a low voice, "who are you really? How did you learn this?" The boy's eyes darkened, a shadow of memory crossing his face. "The time will come when you will know. For now, let her heal." Armin studied him silently, his mind restless but his heart strangely at peace. For years, he had lived in darkness, but tonight, he had seen a light, fragile but real. And as he stood by his daughter's bedside, watching her sleep with a smile, he realized that something had changed forever. The chains of despair had cracked, and in their place, a spark of hope burned bright. The days that followed felt like a dream for Armin and his daughter. Every evening, the boy would come to Aisha's room with his pouch of herbs and his old wooden flute. He prepared the paste carefully, rubbing it onto her legs with a gentle patience, and then he would play his music until the room felt warm with peace. Each night, Aisha's toes twitched a little more, her ankles shook, her legs moved slightly stronger. The changes were small, but to her and her father, they were miracles. For the first time in years, Armin woke each morning with a new energy. Instead of despair, he felt excitement, even nervousness, wondering what progress the next day would bring. The mansion also began to change. Servants who once walked quietly now whispered to each other about the strange boy who had done what doctors could not. They peeked into Aisha's room, shocked to see her legs trembling with life again. Some crossed themselves in prayer, others wiped away tears. For the first time, the house that had been drowned in silence was filling with hope. But in Armin's heart, questions grew. Who was this boy really? How could a beggar, with no wealth, no tools, no medical training, do what science and money had failed to achieve? One evening, after Aisha had fallen asleep with a smile on her face, Armin found the boy sitting quietly in the garden, staring at the moon. Armin sat beside him, his heavy voice breaking the silence. "You have to tell me," he said. "How do you know these things? How did you learn this?" "Why, my daughter?" The boy didn't answer at first. He kept his eyes on the silver glow of the moon, his expression calm but thoughtful. Finally, he spoke softly. "Because of her mother." Armin froze. His breath caught in his throat. "What did you say?" The boy turned to him, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Years ago, before your wife passed away, she found me. I was nothing then, an orphan, starving, sleeping in the streets. People walked past me every day, but she stopped. She gave me food. She spoke to me kindly. She even gave me clothes to wear when I had none. She treated me like a human when no one else did." Armin's chest tightened. His late wife, Leela, had been a woman of compassion, always helping others, even when he told her that such kindness could be dangerous. He remembered her words, "What is wealth if we cannot share it with those who have nothing?" The boy continued, his voice trembling slightly now. "She didn't just feed me. She taught me. She knew old remedies, secrets from her village, knowledge passed down from her elders. She told me that healing is not only in medicines, but in the bond between hearts. She said, one day, you will use this gift for someone you love, or someone I love. I never forgot her words. Armin's hands shook. His throat felt tight, his heart pounding against his ribs. He had never known this part of his wife's life. She had never told him about the boy, perhaps because she knew he would dismiss it as unimportant. And yet, here that act of kindness was, years later, saving their daughter. The boy lowered his gaze, his voice steady again. When I saw you that evening in the marketplace, I recognized you. I remembered her face in yours. I knew who you were. And I knew it was time to repay her kindness. That is why I came. Armin felt as if the ground had shifted beneath him. All the wealth he had built, all the power he had gathered, meant nothing in this moment. It was his wife's single act of kindness feeding an orphan boy that had brought hope back into their lives. He covered his face with his hands, trying to hold back tears. His voice broke when he finally spoke. Leela, even now, you are still saving us. The boy placed a hand gently on Armin's arm. Kindness never dies. It always returns, in one way or another. Armin nodded, tears sliding down his cheeks. For years, he had carried guilt that he could not save his wife when she had fallen sick. He had buried himself in work, in wealth, trying to fill the hole her absence left behind. But now he realized her love still lived on, not only in their daughter, but also in this boy she had once saved. The revelation changed everything. Armin no longer saw the boy as a beggar. He saw him as a gift, a reminder of his wife's heart, and as the bridge between despair and hope. That night, when he returned to his daughter's room, he watched her sleep peacefully, her legs twitching faintly under the blanket. He touched her hand gently and whispered, "Your mother is still with us, my love. She sent him to us." The days that followed carried even more progress. Aisha's legs grew stronger. She tried standing with help, her arms clinging to her father's shoulders. Her laughter filled the mansion again, and Armin felt like the emptiness in his chest was finally healing. But the memory of the revelation never left him. Every time he looked at the boy, he saw his wife's love reflected back at him. And he knew one truth now more than ever: wealth had not saved his daughter, but love had. The days turned into weeks, and the mansion was no longer the same quiet, heavy place it had been. Laughter had returned. The halls echoed with Aisha's giggles, her voice carrying through the rooms like music. Servants smiled more often, whispering about the strange miracle they were all witnessing. Even the garden seemed brighter, as though nature itself was celebrating. Every evening, the boy came faithfully to Aisha's room. He would mix the herbs, rub them gently onto her legs, and then play his flute. The notes filled the air, warm and soothing, wrapping around her like invisible hands lifting her spirit. Each day brought new progress. First her toes moved. Then her ankles. Then her legs began to lift slightly when she tried. For Armin, watching these small victories was like watching the sun rise after endless nights of darkness. His heart, once heavy with despair, now beat with cautious joy. But deep inside, he was still afraid. What if it all stopped? What if this miracle suddenly ended, leaving them broken again? He prayed silently every night, asking for strength to believe. One morning, everything changed. Armin entered his daughter's room as the sun poured through the tall windows. Aisha sat in her wheelchair, her eyes glowing with excitement. "Baba," she whispered, her voice trembling, "help me stand." Armin froze. His hands tightened around the doorknob. He wanted to protest, to tell her not to rush, but when he looked at her face, he saw determination, not fear. She wanted this. The boy stood beside her, calm as always. "It is time," he said quietly. Armin's heart pounded in his chest as he rushed to her side. He placed his hands under her arms, steadying her small frame. Her legs trembled as they touched the floor. For 2 years, they had been lifeless, but now, They shivered with energy, like a river flowing after being blocked for too long. Aisha gritted her teeth, her little hands clutching her father's shoulders. Slowly, painfully, but bravely, she began to rise. Her knees bent, her body shook, but then she stood. Armin's breath caught in his throat. His arms trembled as he held her, afraid to let go, afraid she might fall. Tears filled his eyes, blurring his vision. Aisha, you're standing, he whispered, his voice breaking. She looked up at him, her lips trembling into a smile. I'm standing, Baba. I'm really standing. The servants, who had gathered quietly at the door, gasped. Some clapped their hands over their mouths, some began to cry softly. It was a sight none of them thought they would ever see again. But the miracle didn't stop there. The boy nodded toward Armin. Let her try. Just a step. Fear filled Armin's chest. A step? It seemed impossible. What if she fell and hurt herself? But Aisha's eyes begged him, full of courage he hadn't seen in years. He swallowed hard and nodded. With trembling legs, she lifted her right foot. It wobbled, dragged slightly, but then it touched the ground ahead. She took a step. The entire room gasped. Then she lifted the other foot. Another step. Her body leaned against her father for balance, but the steps were hers. One step. 2 steps. 3. Armin could no longer hold back. He broke down, tears streaming down his face as he pulled her into his arms. He held her tightly, whispering through sobs, "You did it, my love, you did it." Aisha buried her face into his chest, her own tears soaking his shirt. "Baba, I can walk again. I can really walk." The servants clapped, their cheers filling the room like music. Some cried openly, some laughed in disbelief, but all of them felt the same thing, a miracle unfolding before their very eyes. Armin turned to the boy, who stood quietly in the corner, his flute in his hands. You made this possible," Armin said, his voice choked with gratitude. "How can I ever repay you?" But the boy only shook his head gently. "I told you. I am not here for payment. I only wanted to repay the kindness your wife once gave me. That is enough." Armin's tears flowed even harder. His wife's kindness, her heart, her love, it was still alive, living through this boy, and now through their daughter's healing. From that day onward, Aisha practiced walking every morning and evening. At first, she leaned on her father or the walls for support. Slowly, her legs grew stronger. She began walking across the room on her own, then down the hallway, then through the gardens where she once used to play. Every step she took was a victory, not just for her, but for Armin. Every step was a reminder that no wealth, no mansion, no empire could compare to the gift of life returning to his daughter. The mansion buzzed with joy. Music returned, laughter echoed, and the cold silence that had once haunted the house was gone forever. Armin walked with his daughter hand in hand through the halls, smiling proudly, his heart overflowing with gratitude. But at night, when he was alone in his study, he often sat in silence, thinking about the boy. Who really was he? How could someone so poor, with nothing, carry such great power in his heart? No matter the questions, one truth remained clear. The miracle had unfolded before his very eyes. His daughter was walking again. And for Armin, that was worth more than all the gold in the world. The garden was alive with the sound of birds that morning, their songs rising with the golden sun. Dew sparkled on the grass, and the air was fresh with hope. In the middle of it all, Aisha walked slowly across the stone path, her small steps careful but steady. Her father's hands hovered near her shoulders, ready to catch her if she stumbled, but she didn't stumble. Each step was firm, each step stronger than the last. Servants watched from the windows of the mansion, smiling through tears. Just weeks ago, they had pushed her wheelchair across these very paths. Now she was walking on her own, her face glowing brighter than the morning sun. Armin followed close behind, his chest swelling with pride. Every step his daughter took was like a miracle replaying itself. He had dreamt of this moment for years, and now it was real. His daughter was free again. When she finally stopped, her legs trembling from effort, she turned and looked at him with shining eyes. "Baba, I did it," she whispered, her smile wide. Armin pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. His heart, once heavy with despair, now overflowed with joy. "Yes, my love," he said, his voice breaking. "You did it. You really did." But as he held her, his gaze lifted to the boy who stood a few steps away, quiet and still. The boy was watching them with calm eyes, his flute in one hand, his pouch of herbs tied to his waist. He looked content, almost peaceful, like a man who had completed what he came to do. Armin released his daughter gently and walked toward the boy. For a long moment, the two stood facing each other. The air between them was heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Armin spoke. "You saved her," he said softly. "You gave me back my daughter. There is no treasure on this earth that can equal what you've done. Tell me what you want. Wealth, a house, education, anything, I will give it to you." The boy shook his head slowly. "I told you, sir. I want nothing." Armin frowned, struggling to understand. "How can you say that? You could have a life of comfort. You could have everything you've never had. You would never have to beg again." The boy's eyes softened. "I don't need gold to be rich. I only needed to repay the kindness I was once given. Your wife gave me life when I had nothing. This is my way of honoring her. That is enough for me." Armin's chest tightened. The memory of his late wife returned, her gentle smile, her endless compassion. He realized now that her love was still moving through the world, shaping lives even after she was gone. He lowered his head, humbled in a way he had never felt before. "You are not a beggar," Armin whispered. "You are a blessing." The boy smiled faintly but said nothing. His silence carried more strength than words ever could. That evening, as the sky turned crimson with the setting sun, Armin sat with his daughter in the garden. She leaned against him, her legs tired but her spirit glowing. He stroked her hair gently, his heart finally at peace. "Baba," she said softly, "will he stay with us?" Armin looked at her, then at the boy who sat at a distance, playing his flute under the shade of a tree. The melody drifted across the garden, soft and sweet, filling the air with calm. "I asked him to stay," Armin replied, "but he says he has to go." Aisha's eyes widened. "Go? But why? He helped me. I want him to stay." Armin sighed, his voice heavy with respect. "Because some people are not meant to stay, my love. They are meant to arrive, to change our lives, and then to continue their journey." The girl grew quiet, her young heart struggling to accept it. She listened to the flute, holding her father's hand tightly. Later that night, Armin walked out to find the boy one last time. He found him near the gates of the mansion, the moonlight falling softly on his thin figure. "Are you leaving now?" Armin asked quietly. The boy nodded. "Yes. My work here is done." Armin's throat tightened. He wanted to beg him to stay, to offer him riches again, but he stopped himself. He knew this boy was different. He could not be bound by wealth or promises. Armin stepped closer, his voice breaking. "Before you go, know this. You have changed me. You have given me back not just my daughter, but also my faith. For years, I thought money was everything. You showed me I was wrong. Thank you." The boy bowed his head slightly, his voice soft. "Do not thank me. Thank your wife. Her kindness brought me here. I only followed her light. With that, he turned and began to walk into the night, barefoot and silent, the flute hanging at his side. Armin stood at the gates, watching until the boy's figure disappeared into the darkness. A strange silence filled the air, but it was not the silence of despair. It was the silence of peace, of something sacred. When Armin returned to the mansion, he found his daughter asleep, her body resting after a day full of miracles. He sat beside her bed, holding her hand, and whispered, "You are walking again, my love. And I will never forget the one who gave this gift to us." He leaned back, closing his eyes, tears sliding down his cheeks, not tears of sorrow, but of gratitude. From that day forward, Armin was no longer known only as a millionaire. People began to whisper about him differently. They said he was a man who gave generously, a man who remembered kindness, a man who had learned that true wealth was not gold or power, but love and compassion. And though the boy never returned, his presence remained in the mansion, in the laughter of a girl who walked again, in the heart of a father who was forever changed, and in the quiet memory of a woman whose kindness had outlived her. The miracle was not just in Aisha's legs. The true miracle was in the love that had connected them all, a love that no time, no distance, no death could ever erase.